This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Interested in learning more about investing in startups, launching a new startup and need to raise funding? The Startup Funding Espresso is a daily podcast in a short, concise format delivered to your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. In the time it takes to drink an espresso, you can learn about startup funding. To subscribe, go to investorconnect.org and put your email into the pop-up box. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Hubert Vaz-Nayak, president of the Chicago Booth Angel Network of Texas. The Chicago Booth Angels Network, Texas, was formed by Booth alumni in Texas who came together to identify and invest smartly in startups. They focus on early stage companies that are looking for a diverse, high caliber of investor who can leverage their capital, expertise, and global networks to the advantage of the companies they invest in. Hubert, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure here, Hall.
Great. So can you tell me about your background before investing in early stage companies?
Sure. So, I like to think I've had a rather varied background in the technology sector and across actually, beyond technology in other industries as well. I've been fortunate to be able to work across enterprise and telecom. I've worked with wireless, wireline, enterprise networks, telecom networks, hardware, software, services. Kind of all of that makes up the entire gamut of the technology sector. And leveraging that, into, with my management consulting background, I've been able to work across technology companies, telecom companies, chemicals, agriculture, retail, food, you name it. It's given me a very broad exposure to a broad set of industries that is knowledge and experience and information I'm able to bring to bear to help with my, investment decisions, especially when, the groups I tend to belong to from an angel networking perspective tend to be industry agnostic.
Great. And so what excites you right now?
So what excites me right now, I think, is the fact that we are starting to see a lot of growth, a lot of investment, not just from what the government's been talking about, but also from private sources. And actually, there's a lot of talk in industry and on the public sector side for public-private partnerships. And these partnerships tend to be very large in terms of what they invest. So creating opportunities for a lot of startups. We're seeing a lot of young people. I think, we're definitely well into the next .com wave of growth. And so there's a lot of opportunities that are being presented to people like myself for investment.
Well, that's great. So you see a lot of startups and you see a lot of investors. What's your advice for people investing in startups? What do you tell them to do before they write that check?
You got to get into this putting your ego aside. That's the first thing you really have to do. A lot of people get into this either because they're just following someone into an investment. A lot of people get into this so that they can go around talking about, oh, I've invested in this company, I've invested in that company. That's not what you invest in, right? You invest in this because first, you're obviously looking to make, a good return, right? And obviously after that, what comes next is for you to have fun doing it, being able to make a difference. A lot of people don't have the fortunateness to start their own companies, right? A lot of people coming, especially out of very big companies, because of personal circumstances, because of their backgrounds, they're not really able to become entrepreneurs. And so for them, they're able to live vicariously through entrepreneurs in this process and be able to contribute to the success of those companies. Because when you invest in a company, it's not the entrepreneur's company. It's your company. It's combined. The entrepreneurs and you as an investor is your company because you own a stake, however small it may be, in that company and want to contribute to its success. Some years ago, a very, very wise venture capitalist told me, even the best darn VC funds are never going to get it right? They're going to put their money in 20 companies, out of which 10 of them, they're going to lose all their money. And about 5 out of those 15 or 20, maybe they'll get back the money they invested. And 4 out of those 20 They'll get maybe 3 or 4 times what they invested, but they're looking for that one moonshot, that hockey stick growth that's going to give them such a high return that it justifies their entire fund, right? And all the sweat they're putting on 20 companies. The other day, I was talking to an angel investor out of Portland. He says, look, I enjoy doing this. I invested in this one company that gave me a 40x return. So you know what? I can afford to invest in at least 20 more companies that still come out on top, right?
Cool.
So, yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, on the other side of that table, what's your advice for people running startups? What do you tell them to do before they go out to raise funding?
Well, the environment is quite different from what it was 15 or 20 years ago. 15 or 20 years ago, especially during the first dot-com era, people would be walking around Silicon Valley with a sketch of a business plan, on about five pages, and you'll find any number of people willing to give you money on a concept. That's difficult to do today. You're not going to get a concept funded unless you have already been very successful, doing a startup and exiting a startup. So you want to do a startup, you've not done it before. The first thing is to realize you're going to have to build it and build some traction. Second thing you realize is that you as the entrepreneur cannot afford to be CEO and CFO and CTO and head of marketing and head of sales. The reason we have those as separate roles is because those things require people. They require resources. So surround yourself with like-minded but smart people, because smart people will learn how to put on multiple hats, and smart people will know how to adjust when you need to adjust. When you're starting a startup, the challenge is that the vision and the path you forge for yourself will change drastically, constantly. The only constant is going to be the need for change here, and be able to pivot and do it quickly. And when you surround yourself with smart people who can do that, you'll be able to make those changes easily. Now, why am I telling you that smart people are really important? Because that, in my experience, is the biggest factor that investors look for when they make a decision to invest in a company. Personally, I almost never will invest in a company unless I've been able to have quite a few dialogues with the management team. So however great the product may be, however great the idea, if I'm not comfortable with the management team, I'm not going to be investing in that company. When I done my first very large private equity backed startup, the private equity investors told us, they said 60 to 80% of our decision is based on the management team, not the company or the business. Right? So the bigger the deal, the more important the management team.
Great. Well, let's talk about the state of startup investing. How do you see the industry evolving from here?
Well, like we've seen with the VC industry, when I got out of business school many decades ago, there were maybe 1,500 VCs, not VC funds, 1,500 VCs in the country. Today, there must be 1,500 venture capital funds just in Silicon Valley, right? So the same way with the angel investors, as people have gotten more affluent, as more and more people start retiring and wondering what they need to do with themselves, and they have the disposable income, everyone is becoming an angel investor. The question is, do you do it on your own, or do you affiliate yourself with groups and organizations? So when we started the Chicago booth Angel Network of Texas, most other Chicago booth Angel Network members tend to be city-based: New York, Chicago, Silicon Valley, London, Hong Kong. In Texas, it's just something about our state that we find that people tend to work more cohesively. And so when we said let's create a larger organization across the state, all our alumni who were interested in doing the same thing in their own cities jumped on the bandwagon. That's brilliant. We love it, because not only do we get access to more opportunities, but we have a greater pooling of dollars to invest and a greater number of people to tap into for the due diligence, right? So the reason I bring up due diligence is because, to me, apart from the management team, that is the absolutely most critical thing to do when you're investing. There are two schools of thought in my observation, or two approaches that people or organizations use to angel investing today. The first is to do a whole bunch of these deals as quickly as possible. It's what I call the crap on the wall strategy, right? Let's throw a bunch of crap on the wall and see what sticks. And you know what? When you're looking at startups, sometimes that is what it is. That's what it is. And especially when you've got a lot of very hot startups, those guys don't have time, right? They say, hey, if you're not going to invest in me right now, I'm walking down the street and talking to 5 people. And out of those 5, one of them is going to jump on the bandwagon, write me a check by tonight. So you don't have an option. Sometimes you've got to jump. The other school of thought is we'd rather do fewer and better deals. I learned this from being a day trader, a currency trader. When you make a lot of little trades, a lot of crappy trades, and you never really make money in the end. But you make a few judicious trades and you start coming out on top. And the way you get to make a judicious trade is by doing an inordinate amount of due diligence. It may sound irritating when you say that to an entrepreneur, but you know what? It's a dating process. When you think your organization has a lot to offer the entrepreneur, that dating process gets them excited about your money coming in, smarter money. And they like that. Especially when you have a network like the Chicago Booth Business School behind you. Believe me, we bring quite a lot of muscle, when we need to tap into to help these entrepreneurs. So they see a tremendous amount of value in doing that.
Great. And so what do you think is the biggest change we'll see in, say, the next 5 years in this industry?
I think we'll see a squeeze. We're seeing a huge spurt in investments, and I think there's going to be a lot of burn. I think people who don't have the stomach for this will get burned. Perfect example, if you look at what's happened with Robinhood and stocks and GameStop, and a few of those shares, you have people who have absolutely no experience doing this, right? And while the market's going good, they've taken $100 and made it 10,000. But guess what? They're going to get down to $50 very quickly. We know that. And unless they're smart enough to cash out at 10,000, and they're going to get burnt, and they will think twice about getting into this market. And we'll see that a lot, I think, in the next 5 years.
Great. Well, let's talk about your investment thesis. What is it, and what's your criteria for investing in a startup?
Yeah. So what I didn't mention, I actually belong to 2 sizable angel networks. So while I head up the Chicago Booth Angel Network of Texas, I'm also a board member and part of the Thai Houston Angels Network. Thai, which stands for the Indus Entrepreneur, is the world's largest entrepreneurship organization. And again, there too, what we're doing is we're consolidating our Thai chapters across Texas, and we're building out the Thai Texas Angels Network. So we tend to work a lot with universities, for example, with the Rice Business Plan competition. We get a lot of opportunities from there, and we share opportunities across Thai chapters around the globe. And so our investment criteria tends to be pretty similar across both these organizations I work with. We do not typically invest in pre-seed companies. Pre-seed companies, again, are these ones that are looking for money to continue building out their product and get to their first pilot. We expect you to have actually built out much of your product, and we expect you to have at least gone into 1 or 2 companies or customers and proven yourself that you actually have what we call the proof of concept product ready. And so when we're looking to invest, we're looking at the caliber of the management team. We're looking for the money coming in to drive growth. And we're also looking for companies we can align ourselves with where our members, our network, can actually come and help them and make a difference. I'll give you an example. Last year, Thai Houston, we invested in a company called Origin that is in music software. They in fact won the Rice Business Plan competition, which, as you may know, is the world's largest business school business plan competition. And we've enjoyed working with them. A couple of things that have really helped with this company is, for example, a critical part was building the legalese into the software, right? Entertainment legalese. And one of our members just so happens to be a lawyer, a partner in a Silicon Valley law firm that actually has a whole department that does that. And so we were able to contribute tens of thousands of dollars worth of legal hours to help build out this product, right? We made a difference over there. And we've got plenty of examples like that of companies we help experience that your typical VC firm is not going to get you so easy.
Great. Well, you see lots of startups and investors out there
Oh,
today.
I'm sorry. May I finish that train of thought?
Sure.
So we look for companies that have moved past the proof of concept. We are typically industry agnostic, but we tend to limit our investments to companies based in the United States. On a rare occasion, we may consider a company from Europe, like we are doing right now, coming out of the Rice Business Plan competition. But that's because our Thai organization mentored this company from Germany and brought them in, but we love what they're doing. But those are exceptions, not the norm.
Great. And so what are the challenges that you see startups face in today's market?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
So what are the challenges you see startups face these days?
I think it depends on the industry. If we look at the dominant industry in our backyard here, oil and gas, the biggest challenge oil and gas industry startups have is getting to their first pilot plant. It just, maybe, for entrepreneurs, bad luck, is that we have two very slow moving industries that dominate the Houston economy, healthcare and oil and gas. Both those industries are extremely risk averse and very slow to decide, especially when it comes to new technologies. The typical response an entrepreneur gets is, I love you and I love your product, but you go try this somewhere else, and when you succeeded there, then you come back to me. But that also means that the industry is quite incestuous. So if you have a success at one company, you're gold. So landing that first pilot is always the challenge. The second thing, and by the way, that also is an issue across most other industries. It's just that oil and gas and healthcare, it is a challenge. The second is finding the right management. Okay. Fact is that most startups are started by techie people, right? In fact, most startups are started by people who have encountered a particular problem in their own lives. I'd say 80% of startups are a result of that. And so when they're looking to do a startup, they tend to be very technical in nature and are not necessarily CEO material. And if you're not a CEO material kind of person, that can actually be a massive negating factor when it comes time to raising funding. So the challenge is finding somebody who can not only have a meeting of minds with the founder, but be able to, realize that they are not going to be the biggest shareholder of the company and build that business for the shareholders. Oil and gas, the bigger challenges that there are, the number of executives who have successful startup experience, I could literally count them on the fingers of one hand. So that tends to be a challenge over here.
So, and what are the challenges that you see the investor faces in today's market?
I think the challenge they face is sometimes they're drinking from a fire hose in terms of opportunities. So when you're looking at a lot of really good opportunities, how do you make a decision where to invest? That's one. And I'll come back to that point. The second is being able to sift through many similar companies. And I'll give you an example there first. Let's get back to my first point, right? The first is drinking from a fire hose. Right now, across just the two organizations I'm working with, we're looking at about 7 companies that are really good investment opportunities. Investors have only so many dollars available. And the question is, do I get into all 7 or 5 and dilute myself, or do I really focus on just a couple of them, right? But along with that, evaluating 6 or 7 companies is finding enough people to go do a deep dive to drive that due diligence, because that's a lot of legwork, right? You're asking the company for a whole bunch of documents, legal documents, financial documents, and then you want to talk to the management team over and over. You want to talk to their customers, their existing investors, their mentors. Heck, in one case, we even talked to their faculty, right? And when the faculty said, you're investing, we're going to invest too, then we knew this was pretty kosher, right? So that is one challenge. The other challenge, and refresh my mind and my memory here, Hall, what was I? The second point was,
well, they're drinking from a fire hose, and they could either invest in 7 companies or just one of the 7 companies.
yeah.
And this is a combination. Many investors tell me there is out there. There's many companies in each sector to go after. Which
Yes.
one of those 7 can you go for?
Yeah, that's the other big problem, is that when somebody comes up with a mousetrap, it's not like they're the only ones who came up with the solution, the best mousetrap. So typically, when you listen to a pitch from an entrepreneur, it's most probably one of 4 or 5 similar ones you come across, right? And then you have to figure out, well, how many others am I missing out there? Which of them is going to be a potential winner? I'll give you an example. We listened to 2 pitches recently at the Rice Business Plan competition, which talked about providing tools to in-home yoga and exercise, weight loss trainers and mentors, right? And that was 2. And all of a sudden, earlier this week, I get pinged by an executive out of somewhere in Europe saying, hey, we've got a product that does this, and we think we're the only ones doing it in England and Australia and in Hong Kong. And I said, you know what? That's what I heard from 2 others in the last week.
Wow.
And that's the thing. Right? So there's 3 that I came across, and it's not like my reach is so phenomenal, right? So there must be another dozen such companies. And, I came across the same thing in real estate software as well, So the question is, there's always that worry. Do I pull a trigger with this company, or do I have to go and look for that potential competitor, and figure out which of all of these companies out there is the best one to go? Finally comes down to the management team and the management team's ability to operationalize their plan the quickest.
Good. So you see a lot of different applications and sectors out there. If you had to pick 1 or 2 that you think are really good opportunities for investors to pursue today, what do you put at the top of the list?
My answer here is going to be a little biased because of my technology background. Okay. What's happened over the last few years is that across industry, no matter what the industries, and even across industries in terms of functions like supply chain and product development and blah blah, we have seen an explosion of data. What's happening is that all this data is becoming very specialized and stored in silos. So these massive, relatively narrow, deep silos of data. And you've got people in these companies with industry expertise who are pulling this data from these various repositories and then creating insights or intelligence from that. It's a labor-intensive manual process. And so what I'm seeing a lot of is front ends, interfaces being built that are starting to help extract this data very rapidly and help you rapidly create insights. Things that would normally take days can now be done in a matter of minutes or seconds. But where that really evolves is in artificial intelligence being attached to these engines. It's very, very critical. And if you look at this and you extrapolate it and say, well, where does this go? If you're going to create these specialized functional or industry front ends and attach a human being to some level of artificial intelligence to help you create new gems, new insights that give you an advantage, or your company advantage, where does this go? And the next thing is, at some point, artificial intelligence is going to be a lot smarter than us human beings. And an artificial intelligence that is able to look beyond just that functional area or that industry-specific capability. Think of it as a Google or Alexa that's a lot smarter, pulling in data from a broad range of databases and data sources. Right? So that's where I see it kind of going, Do I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later? I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. Our ability as a species to stay ahead of our ability to imagine the fantastical, that gap is narrowing. Right?
Great.
So we're just accelerating our development as a species technologically.
So in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I think for people looking to get into angel investing, do not get into this as a means to get rich. Okay? Angel investing is not about getting rich. Getting rich, if you do, is a lucky byproduct of angel investing. Get into it because you want to enjoy it. When you put money into a startup, remember, there is a very, very high probability you're never going to take that money out. And even if you do, it could be years before that happens. And it usually is years before that happens. So put money in there that you can kind of play with, money you're not going to need or depend on getting very quickly. And I know of people who, I made an investment about a couple of years ago. The company got acquired a year later. And, I made a couple of, I made about 250% return on that. Right? It's good. But that's not the norm. That's not the norm, right? Plan on your exit about 7 years on average.
Cool.
That's my advice to people wanting to get into angel investing.
That's good advice. They say angel investors want to do a little good, make a little money, have a little fun. In my experience is if you can get all three going, that's going to be a good experience. If you only have one of those going, that's not quite as satisfying.
Yep. And then also, of course, as I said earlier, use it to live vicariously through entrepreneurs.
Good point. Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Well, the easiest way is if you go to the boothangels.texas.com website and say contact, click on the contact, it'll send me an email directly.
Okay, great. We'll put that in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Hall T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.